Again, here on Commentator's Corner, we look outside of the remit of commentators and hosts, and I've got a man who's very, very much entrenched within the sim racing industry and so much more besides. A big warm welcome on episode 27 to SimStaff CEO and founder, Josh Martin, who I've known for quite a time. Josh, how are you, buddy? Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm doing well, Alex. Thanks for having me. It's good to catch up.
Indeed. So, Josh, if you'd like to, what I now try and get people to do is just to sort of give a bit of brief background. So, if you're in your own time, introduce yourselves to our listeners and our viewers.
Yeah, no pressure, eh? So I've been involved in the sim racing space now for probably 7 or 8 years. I started off as a driver, so did a little bit of sim racing, representing Thrustmaster and then Bentley during SRO Esports. Also alongside that was kind of working in the event space, and obviously COVID kind of decimated that. So launched my own business called SimStaff. So what we kind of do is we bring sim racers together with brands who are involved in sim racing, be that broadcasting, live events, anything in between, stewarding. And so I now run that full time and trying to just help people kind of get into sim racing and help the industry grow.
Well, we first, thanks very much for that, first of all, Josh. The first time we came across each other was the Team Brit Summer Series when you were back then still a Thrustmaster representative running in the Bentley Continental GT3, having some battles with Colin Turkington at the same time in ACC, because I was doing the commentary. Mike, our good friend Mike Yao, you are definitely going to be shoehorned onto the show whether you like it or not. I don't care. He was doing the broadcasting, and it was on ACC. And I remember you and him having a bit of a ding dong battle at Laguna Seca. But then, obviously, our paths became intertwined when, first of all, for a lot of people that don't know, Josh was actually aligned with David Perel at SimGrid as well in as part of your previous history, and that's how Josh and I got to know each other. And then it sort of came on from there. But SimStaff is sort of like an all solutions package. As you said, broadcasting. I've been, for those that do know, I do actually work for Josh. Let's just get that out of the open now. But I think I think I was one of the first people to join, if I remember correctly. One of the very
definitely.
first people.
You're one of the first, and I think for me that's what's so interesting. Obviously, listening to the episodes you've been doing is kind of looking at it from a different angle, because I've had the pleasure of listening to you many a times, like you say, commentating on my races or other people's races. And so, you're one of our very first, I think we called them hosts at the time, right? But commentators, hosts, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's sort of the same, really, but it's just given a different title. Depending on what broadcast you're doing, folks.
Add it to the CV.
Add it to the CV, just another notch on the tomahawk. But SimStaff, over the last 2 to 3 years since COVID-19 came around, obviously started to go into the broadcasting space with quite a few clients, which has now gone on to LAN events, event setups. Of course, SimStaff has been very, very helpful with Children in Need quite recently, and there was that big, massive tour, but Josh and I still managed to have time to briefly catch up at the Sim Racing Expo at Dortmund. But I think the event space now, Josh, is really starting to gather pace, gather momentum, with stuff like ESLR1, DreamHack, F1 Esports. There's a lot going on now where people are actually able to physically go to a LAN event, try out the latest gear, or watch a fantastic esports tournament. How has that been in terms of SimStaff's progression over the last 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, you're spot on. I think what we've seen is a lot of people maybe expected sim racing to kind of have that bubble that burst after the pandemic, but in reality, all that's happened is it's shifted more towards events, like you said. I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but if we looked at like your event calendar, for example, in the past 12 months, you've probably done more sim racing related LAN events than even before the pandemic, and there's a lot of people in that position. I think it's really exciting to see where sim racing's heading, and I think what's been nice is the lockdowns kind of gave people a chance to understand what sim racing was. They had people basically like yourself kind of guiding their hand and explaining that this is kind of like real racing, just bear with us and see what happens. And now we're in a position where we're reaching that to just an even wider audience than before. So the event space is growing really quickly. We're obviously seeing a lot of demand, and I'm sure people like yourself are as well.
Yeah, I mean the thing is that LAN events aren't just here over in continental Europe, but
Mm,
SimStaff, for those that do keep an eye on Josh's social media or SimStaff social media, there is a lot of activity actually across the pond. Both like North America and Canada, which is also quite interesting. But that is going to go further afield, I would imagine, Josh, where there is this global expansion. You've got the Emirates, the Emirati nations now really
mm.
putting a lot of backing into tournaments, such as recently Gamers 8 in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. There was a lot of let's say differing opinions about why was it being held there, but we're not going to get into the semantics or the politics of it. But for esports in general, that more nations are really,
Mm.
really encapsulating not just sim racing, but esports in general with Counter Strike 2, ESLR 1, League of Legends, that there's so much going on that there's only going to be a time when it's literally going to explode, and it's going to be one of the biggest things that a lot of people are going to be talking about because I speak to a lot of people anyway, and they go, "Well, I'm actually enjoying esports more than I am IRL," which is
Oh, wow.
actually quite an interesting tack because when you're seeing with the current generation of people that we have, the younger generation, where they're coming through and they're going like, "I'm really enjoying getting on a sim rig," or "I'm really enjoying getting behind my triple screen setup on my desk at home and playing Counter Strike 2 or League of Legends or
Mm.
whatever game it is their preference." There is going to be this point where we are going to see this massive explosion of esports in general, along with sim racing, which is just part and parcel of this genre. How do you see it sort of possibly maturing in the next 5 years or so, from a
Yeah,
hypothetical standpoint?
it's interesting, right? So you're spot on. Just kind of on the face of it, it seems like in more countries it's becoming more popular. You know, we helped with the shooting for ESR1, for example, and we also did some stuff for like the pop-up stops for the Australian Grand Prix. So we've kind of been into those markets. For example, and like you say, North America is growing. I think for me, what's important, and I'd be curious to hear your thought as well, is we need to open up the door more to people who are more casual racers. You know, people who maybe still play the F1 game a lot or play Gran Turismo a lot, but play on a controller instead of a
Mm.
wheelbase. I think in order for us to kind of hit that boom, you know, we really need to open the door wider and recognize that it doesn't just have to be the person who's sitting on a £5,000 rig that's quick. And I think, you know, ultimately from what I've seen, the racing is just as good if it's on controller versus controller. And I'm sure from a production perspective, it looks just as good as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, console racing really has been part and parcel of how I grew up. I mean, I'm
Mm.
talking everyone knows how old I am, so I don't really give a damn about giving away my age because I am in my mid 40s. But I still remember the days of getting on, like, say, the Sega Genesis or what we knew
Mm.
over here in the United Kingdom as the Sega Mega Drive, um, whereby it was Outrun or Turbo Outrun or
Mm.
Daytona. Those are the games that of my generation really got involved. I mean, even as far back as the what was known as the Famicom over in Japan, but known as the Super Nintendo over here.
Mm.
You had so much back then where consoles were the main sort of real way of tapping into talent. And then we had, like, say, Forza started that
Mhm.
as well. Um, let's take, for instance, one driver who's on the sim racing sphere. Dara McCormack, one of the hotshots at Williams Esports, originally was a Forza Horizon specialist. And now he's
Mhm.
ACC, ESLR1. It
Yeah.
is quite funny how I think, as you said, sim racing, a lot of people see the £3,000 PCs, the
Mm.
£750 sim rig. Then you've got your direct drive, your steering wheel, you've got your pedals, you've got your triples, or whatever your preference is on your sim rig. But I think console racing now, with the introduction of Forza Motorsport coming to Xbox and Microsoft, could be maybe a potential turning point. I mean, Gran Turismo has been around since day dot. So I think
Mm.
there's always going to be a market for console racing. I think, as you said, it's like marks like Forza, like Gran Turismo, really need to sort of try and help push that new medium of talent forward for them to possibly go into that next level where they might get signed by a major team in the not too distant future.
Definitely. Have you done much commentary on console racing before?
I never have. I'll be
No?
honest
Okay,
with you.
I'm really curious to hear what it's like. I would assume that, you know, take the technical limitations away of what you can kind of get in terms of feeds and stuff. But I think the racing must just be as good, and the experience must just be as good as well, right?
I've seen some console leagues, like say for F1 22 or F1
Mm,
23, and yeah, you can still get the real kind of feel because some people could be running on a PS5 with a Logitech G29 and a set of pedals, or they could be on the controller. So thereby, there's another untapped market of talent, I think, personally, for esports racing in general. And the reason why I said esports is because you say sim racing, and we go back to that stereotype, don't we, Josh, where it's in a
mm,
rig with the wheels, with the pedals, all the gear, and all that kind of stuff. Where there's some kids just playing on a big TV with a console and a controller in front of
yeah.
them, and they're enjoying. They've got a set of headsets that are connected to the internet to a server. It's more. I think console racing is a lot easier because you've got more of that plug and play emphasis. And for what do I mean by that, folks? It's easy just to get an internet connection, put in an Ethernet cable, get your headset, plug it into a 3.5 mm jack, get your controller fully charged up, and get yourself ready. And then they can progress from there. So that's how I see that this could be a possible way of getting new talent into esports racing in general.
No, definitely. I think that for me is like obviously the Sim Racing Expo this year. You had a very big presence there from a commentary perspective and hosting perspective, and I think I would love to see that, we have on each day, we obviously have the high profile championships and races going on, but like, let's have a Forza race where it's only controller users or whatever the case may be. And just like open up, like you say, open up to wider people, because that's where we'll get the massive audiences and the higher player bases to make it, like you said, a lasting esports title rather than just niche, which has got like, I don't know, 200-300 people who are really quick and everyone kind of knows the same names.
Yeah, that's the thing because I think a lot of people. There has been some discussion on social media about sim racing in general,
Mm,
whereby what we see in Formula One are stories that go alongside the racing.
yeah.
And I think that's one of the other things that a lot of people, and myself included, when we saw ESLR1 in Katowice for the first couple of rounds of the season, for the spring
Mm,
season, we were all hoping, like, yeah, we're going to see some possible rivalries draw up,
mm.
but the drivers didn't really give it away. Like it was basically you're pointing a camera in someone's face who isn't. Let's not forget, folks, sim racers, and you know this from experience, Josh, are very much encapsulated in their own bubbles. And this is not derogatory in any way, but this is
Yeah.
just what we see. This is what I see from a perspective. But having gotten to work with some of the sim racers who I've gotten to know very very well, like I say, Josh, it's not making a stereotypical viewpoint on it. I think it's just a generalization that we do see on a lot of personalities within sim racing. Niels Noyaux, for instance, has a lot to say on socials, but he makes
Yeah.
very, very good points. Was
Mhm.
also very, very uh, was very, very provided constructive feedback for commentators that
Mm.
are in sim racing. Now, for those wondering, I do not have a sim rig. I don't. I've used Sims before. I've used RF2. I've had a go on ACC, iRacing. I think I even competed at the VCO
Oh, nice.
Race Spot Summit at Milton Keynes at Simply
Yeah,
Race,
yeah.
and did the GT4 because I thought it'd be the easy one, and then quickly find out how you have to work with iRacing in comparison with ACC. It's a bit of a different kettle of fish. Each of these platforms have their own dynamics. But coming on to SimStaff's event provision
Mm.
here, Josh, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. From your perspective, obviously, you've been the man that's really been sort of like not only the CEO, but also getting the right people on board, getting the right team on board, and looking for the right staff. When it comes to event managers, event technicians, and also support staff such as stewards, hosts, broadcasters, what do you actually look for yourself personally, saying, is this someone that I think is capable? Is this someone I could potentially trust with representing sim staff in the right way?
Yeah, so depending on the role, obviously it varies slightly. But I think if we look at the broadcasting kind of specifically, just given the environment. But I think last summer we were doing on average, I think between 100 and 120 hours of paid production per month, which for sim racing it was quite a bit at the time. And with that comes kind of the bank of hosts and talent that we use, not only from a technical side, but from a commentary side. And I think something you just touched upon there really, which is when it comes to sim racing, if the drivers aren't telling a story, I kind of feel it falls onto the commentators or hosts to tell that story for them. So really what I'm looking for when we work with hosting or commentary talent is people who have that ability to not just talk about, the gaps that are going on in a race, but kind of do the research and talk about, driver A, why they got into sim racing, what they're up to, and kind of craft that narrative and that story. Because as you know yourself, if you're commentating on a 24-hour race, it can get quite, quite slow, I guess, during the night stints or that kind of stuff. And if you have a bit of banter between the commentators or you have some stories going on, it just adds to the viewer experience and makes them find someone to root for. So for us, when we're trying to find, commentary and hosting talent, it is that people that can bring that energy and that personality to the race. And I'm curious from a commentator's perspective, is that something that comes naturally? Is it something you have to kind of work on? I know you obviously do a lot of research before races. Like, what's that experience kind of like from your side?
Well, I think you're always preparing. You've got the 7Ps. Piss poor preparation promotes piss poor performance. That is one of the standouts that I have to say. And this is a not for kids podcast, folks. So if there are some slight or major expletives, please don't worry about it. It's part and parcel of this. We're just people at the end of the day. We all have stories to tell. I think if you've worked with a certain group of people, like say a certain group of drivers, and you've gotten to know them. I think, for instance, I'll give you a perfect example. Danny Lafuente from Williams Esports. Great character. Fast driver, sometimes hasn't had the best of luck. And then I was talking to him and we got talking about, the Disney film Cars. He's a big fan of Lightning McQueen. So I straight on the fly, there was no way I was going to let him get away with it, which was I nicknamed him Lightning Lafuente, which
Nice.
stuck. And Danny, well, the funny thing is that because I was at the CrowdStrike 24 hours, so we had a few of the Williams Esports guys there. So we had Tinko, we had Mr. Belatsiitis, Vasilios was there. I think we had Tinko, I think we had Dara, Louis was there as well, Louis Naza. And then Danny I recognized this Spanish, accent. And I'm like, no way is he here. And he said, hey, Alex. And I was like, oh my God. And, it's really, really weird when you get to talk to these people offline, because when you're talking to a very, very great group of people. I still remember when I was doing my first broadcast with Dara McCormack, and he said, hi, Alex. And the icebreaker was telling me phonetically how to pronounce his first name. And straight away, it's like, brilliant. It saves me a job. But I would still look up, okay, how is that pronounced? Because it's an Irish first name. It's but it's just like you want to get to know the people. And it's always nice when you have these LAN events, you can actually go and talk to them. You're not having to work around a schedule that they're having to be on, because we know that these professional sim racing drivers are paid to do a job. They're paid to work. They're paid to perform. And it's the same for everybody, whether it goes to BS competition, UOL, Apex, Redline, whoever. And I was quite surprised. I think a lot of people were taken aback with the news that Oracle, Red Bull Racing, and Redline have now decided to join forces and effectively become the biggest superpower in sim racing. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming after the silly season we had earlier on this year before ESL. A whole one with the likes of Beneke and Kazdorp and Lerner going to Mouse. And then you have FaZe come into the sim racing space with an amalgam, a collaboration with Porsche, which was completely a big surprise, I think, to a lot of people. But yeah, I think it's about knowing the people. If you know the people, you can help tell that story. And there's been many a times, like Jack Keithley from Williams, he lives 30 minutes up the road from me, and he's a great guy. Always got time for Jack. But it's just about knowing the people. If you know the people and you're working with them on a broadcast, you can help tell that story. You can talk about previous successes. If it's an iRacing special event, what have been their previous results? It's that kind of work that you really, as a commentator or a host, need to sort of look at and go, okay, right, who have I commentated out of this squad? Who haven't I commentated on over this squad? So you'll then get to know the personalities once you interview them on a hosting stream or a casting stream. But by getting to know the people in person, I think is just as crucial as getting to talk to them on a Discord. Or I've even got some of the drivers' WhatsApp numbers, so like we're conversing that way. So you're using every single modicum of modern day technology to get in touch.
And so that's the big thing. I think as sim racing has become more professional, like you say, I think the role of the commentator has as well. Gone are the days where it's just one person doing it by themselves, broadcasting and commentating, and they happen to know the drivers because they race in the same league. And nowadays, that's kind of like that's like the barrier to or like the entry level stuff. Whereas obviously the level you're working at is so much higher now, and it's that, like you said, you're treating them like professionals. You're doing your research. You're having a bit of banter with them, and I think as someone who watches, even as someone who watches in the space, you can just tell the difference instantly between a commentator who is passionate and is doing that research versus someone who's just kind of relying on even just their knowledge of the game rather than who's playing. So it's really interesting how that's shaping and evolving, and hopefully that becomes the new standard of like, do your research, have some engagement with the drivers beforehand, because it makes it so much better overall, doesn't it?
I think also the quality of the casting or the commentary does really add to that broadcast, because
For sure.
if those people have done their research and you are seeing a lot of people that have, it's quite funny because we've seen a lot of people from IRL come into sim racing, like myself, David Addison, quite a few other people. John Heindel at Radio Le Mans, perfect example. Him and Nick Damon did the commentary for the events at the Sim Racing Expo back in 2021. For those that didn't, the thing was, I was involved with the Roads to Sim Racing Expo with Yusuf bin Sahil, so we were asked to jump on board with that. And I had a chat with Michael Vamsa, and I said, "Look," he said, "Look, I'm sorry about that." I said, "Look, I haven't got any problem with it. You made that decision at the time. That's fine. I've not got an issue with it, because from my thoughts as a commentator is that you're not going to get every gig, folks. You're not going to get every gig. You're going to be given an opportunity to showcase your skills. Don't be worried if you're not going to get this gig or that gig or the other. Just wait and see what happens, because like there'll be times when a good friend of ours, Steve Proudy, will say to me, "Okay, what's your availability?" So by showing that you're willing is to respond to that very, very quickly. If you respond to it quickly, then at least they know, brilliant, okay, he's locked it in. And I think also the first impression does last, Josh, as well. Like if it's your
100%.
first time and it's not on one of these league broadcasts, which I will be honest with, WOR, PSGL, they're getting so professional these days. It's absolutely outstanding how, the way that modern technology is through vMix, through OBS. There's so many different platforms where you can live stream sim racing, folks. And just the amount of dexterity that these broadcasters have, Mike Yao, the sim racing Swiss Army knife, as I called him when I started working with him back 3 years ago, or 3.5 years ago. The amount of screens that a broadcaster has is quite significant. Like, for instance, Mike will have 6 to 8 screens at one point, and 2 laptops, and 2 keyboards, and 2 mice, and 3 headsets, because he'll be talking to other people along with you. So he'll have one set on the go for the commentators, one set for, like, say, his assistant producer or whatever. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes with broadcasting, Josh, that you and I both know. But because of, with, like, say, stewarding and also people being spotters as well. That's one thing we haven't talked about, where the stewards will say, "Okay, spotters need you to keep an eye on any incidents out there." That's also another way of making sure that for sim racing, there's an effective race control system.
No, exactly. And I just to kind of go a bit deeper into what you were saying about first impressions, from our side, when we're pitching to a client, we obviously have different types of show that we're pitching. So maybe it's a highlights reel, maybe it's a race broadcast, maybe it's more of a team casual stream, or maybe it's just an absurd challenge. Different type of hosting talent will fit those types of shows, some better than others. And it's not necessarily that one commentator is better than the other. It's just that their personality and style matches a bit more. So you're 100% right. If you can show that you're willing to be proactive and to learn and to try to adjust, even if you don't get picked for a certain show type, it's not necessarily because you've done a worse job. Someone like yourself is always kind of like a go-to for us when it comes to those race broadcasts. Because like I say, you're doing the research not only about the drivers, but who's won it last year, what was the fastest lap. And this is all what crafts to the story. Whereas we've used someone like Lawrence de Souza for some commentary streams because it's a bit more relaxed and casual and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's by no means a credit or discredit to either person. It's just so important to find the style of broadcast that works for you. And I mean, do you have any advice for anybody who's maybe listening, trying to work out what kind of show or style they can try to find from their commentary side?
I would have to say the advice that I would give to a lot of people out there is be multi-adaptable. There are so many different platforms out there. You've got RF2, iRacing, Automobilista 2, ACC, and I'm so happy that the Nürburgring is coming, thanks to the IGTC for next year. Well done, Kunos. About blooming time.
Yeah.
But of course, AC2 has now been apparently delayed to summer 2024, but that is completely understandable, especially with ACC being the official SRO esports game as well. And the IGTC will have the 24 hours of the Nürburgring Nordschleife on its calendar next year, and that has been confirmed. So
It'd be so good.
oh man, I mean, like Jardier, random call sign, Lawrence, they've all gone crazy over it. I've never seen Jardier so giddy in all my life, like saying, "Oh my god, yeah, Nords is coming, Nords is coming." It's great, and I think also you have to be multi-adaptable, but you have to make sure that if you don't know anything, ask a question, because
Yeah.
the thing is with me, one of the things that I try and do is that if I have the opportunity to go on a sim rig, no matter what platform it is, I will have a go because I want to
Mhm.
understand force feedback. I want to understand a vehicle's dynamics or how it reacts through corners, um, which is why R Factor 2 was the first ever platform that I actually encountered through Simply Race. And that for me gave me an understanding initially, but now having tried iRacing, now having tried ACC, I understand the games a lot more. So the more that you can understand, if you haven't got a sim rig at home, and you know someone who's a friend, and you get the opportunity to go around theirs, have a go on the sim rig. It
Mm.
doesn't, it might be 5-10 minutes, but it means at least you get an understanding. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was at the Eau Rouge sim racing facility at Zolder, and
Mm.
Alex Vermont, who's one of their engineers there, I decided to go. I said, "Look, can I change it to ACC because I want to try out Circuit Zolder M4 GT3?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah, no problem." And I was improving lap upon lap, but the tire pressures were down. And then he said, "Right, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stiffen it up a little bit by increasing the tire pressures." My lap times, folks, were 8 seconds slower than when it was previously. So
Oh
you
yeah.
understand, yeah. Because the thing was, in the BMW, I was flinging it through the where you go through the Kleine Chicane and then go over the crest.
Oh
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
flinging it through there at third gear at 110 kilometers an hour with reckless abandon, but I was making up significant inroads. But I found that the car was a lot snappier trying to
Mm.
accelerate. When you try and put the throttle down, when the tire pressures are lower, it has more of a contact patch on the circuit.
Mm.
When the tire pressures are higher, there's less contact patch, so you might get some oppo lock situations, and I found plenty of them. And I even came out of I was what was it? I was going down to the Jackie X chicane,
Mm.
and I'd come out of Terlarman, which is the corner before it, and I'd gently given it some throttle, but I didn't realise that I've overcompensated on the throttle modulation, and the car's had a tank slapper, the right front's gone into the wall, and I've gone, damn. But that is about understanding the characteristics of setup.
Exactly.
That's quite crucial from my perspective. But I think if you are prepared, you make sure that you're disposable as much as you can. If you're not going to be available, be honest about it. Don't
Mhm.
say, yeah, I can do it, and then find that you've double booked yourself. Don't want to do that because that might incur the wrath of people wanting to take you on. If you say, okay, well, I can't do that one, but I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, they'll be absolutely fine with that because then at least they know Okay, we can't call upon him because he's got that to do. He's got that going on. That's how Steve does it. If he asks me, "Are you available?" I'll say, "Yeah, I'm available for that. That. Can't do that. I've already got a gig." By doing it, you're doing the right thing. You're not setting yourself up for a fall, but learn at every opportunity you get. If you're a colour commentator and you're wanting to do that lead commentary role, chat with the people who are leading the broadcasts. Say to them,
Mm.
how can you be so composed? How can you introduce something, like a stream the way you do? The thing is, you're going to have your own style. No one commentator has the same style. I mean, George Morgan, who was our first ever guest on Commentator's Corner, back on episode number 1, is the man who I've monikered with the following. He says "go" more times than Murray Walker. George says it 5 times. Murray
Fair.
said it 3 times when he started a Formula One commentary
Oh.
race. So, but everyone has the unique styles. Everyone knows that, not every commentator is going to be everyone's cup of tea.
No, definitely. And I think that would probably be my last most crucial piece of advice is transparency. There's nothing worse than us booking someone on the assumption they say they're free, but then saying, "Oh, actually, I've got a job here elsewhere I want to do." If you tell us that you're busy, the byproduct, and I hope nobody does this to the extreme, but if you tell us, "Yeah, I've got this project on, I've got this project on," it gives us a good indication of where someone is in their career as well. Like you do so much, Alex, with so many different series, like you said, that versatility, that for us, or myself, it means that actually I go, "Oh, okay, so he can do this type of race commentary or this type of commentary." Whereas if someone's just very quiet and not very responsive or doesn't tell us what they're up to, we kind of don't really know where they're at. And it's a two-way street. The more information you give us, the more we can give you, and potentially the more jobs, and it's a win-win. So that transparency is so crucial.
Right, I've got to ask you a couple of final questions because I know you're a very, very busy man. So thanks for squeezing me into your schedule as always. When you were
Yeah.
racing for Thrustmaster, Josh, what were some of the highlights of your time with them in terms of like successes and being able to represent the brand as well?
Yeah, I think for me, the two that come to highlight are SRO esports. So although I was racing for Bentley, I was still with Thrustmaster at the time. And that obviously kind of played a bit in terms of helping me get in front of them to chat, which was really, really cool. In terms of more success for our esports back in 2021, I finished technically 7th overall and then 5th after penalties were applied, which was quite cool. It was quite a competitive championship as well. So, I mean, when you have a backing from a brand like that, it obviously helps a lot in terms of just being able to get kit early, give some feedback. Yeah, those were 2 really standout moments for me.
And I've got to well, there is a question that I ask to every one of our guests when I can actually fit it in. Josh, if you were given no limit, no glass ceiling, okay, and you had the choice of taking a car, be it race or road car, around any circuit of your choice, tell me what you go for and why.
Oh man. So I think for me, I'm a huge Sebastian Vettel fan. So for me, it would have to be probably one of his championship winning cars. And in terms of track, that's so tricky. I really like the Nordschleife, but I don't think that's a good fit for an F1 car. Maybe it is. But that would probably be my combo for those two. It's just such a great combo.
Okay, that's a pretty good one. I'm going to go with the car that Jenson Button decided to rag around Bathurst.
Nice. Okay.
So
Fair.
so we've gone F1. So you've gone Red Bull, I've gone McLaren. You've gone Nordschleife, I've gone Mount Panorama.
That's a good combination.
So
Yeah.
2 completely different circuits. But Josh, where can everyone find SimStaff on social media before we close things out?
Yeah, so our website is simstaff.net. You can see us on there. Or if you just search SimStaff, we're coming up on most of the rankings now. We've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, Instagram. And if you want to follow myself, it's jjosh.martin. So 2 J's. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram as well.
Brilliant. Well, folks, a big thank you to Josh for joining me here on episode 27 of Commentator's Corner. More guests are lined up. There are some really good chats that will be coming up. But thank you very much, Josh, for joining me. Thanks to everyone for watching. Don't forget, you can not only watch this on YouTube, but you can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. We'll see you very soon for episode 28. Thanks very much. See you again soon. Goodbye.